So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to COVID 360 Impact Conversations. My name is Larry Cole. I'm your host. And today I have someone I just actually met recently, I would say about a month ago. And I've been following some of her comments online when it dealt with liver disease and COVID and long COVID. And then we decided to do a phone call. And from that phone call, I thought this lady was so fascinating that I wanted to do a podcast because I think she's got a message that I want to get out there. So her name is Sue Green. Hi, Sue. How are you?
Hi, Larry. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for coming on. So Sue is an author of a book called "Don't Call My Liver Fat." Sue has an exhaustive history, or a big history, as an executive in the healthcare sector, and I thought, as I try to do on every show, is I like to talk first about, could you give us some of your background? Because I think that helps people frame the conversation later as to, why are you here? But also, who was Sue before there was liver disease and COVID and long COVID? So who's that lady?
Sure. I started out as a nurse, an RN, got a BSN at University of Delaware, started working clinically, and pretty quickly got into management. Ended up getting a master's in social work and an MBA. Just my career kind of took off. I have a unique set of skills that were desired by hospitals, and I was able to walk into hospitals as a consultant and analyze, what needed to happen to improve the care and the safety of the care. And also I have a particular skill at eliminating waste in systems, and always made money for every client I had. I went back and forth between consulting and being a chief operating officer of several large hospitals. The highlight of my career in terms of having the best time was in Atlanta at Grady Health System.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, Emory and Morehouse were the medical staff there. I saw things there that I'd never seen before in my life. And it's a public hospital, very large. Lots of people came in for care without having seen a doctor, sometimes ever. Often they hadn't seen one in a long time. So advanced disease and into this system that was about ready to go bankrupt when I went there. We, the team of us there, pretty quickly, within a year, turned it around, and it made a lot of money that first year. Through a lot of different interventions that we did, but it was a very fun job. I really enjoyed the people there, the doctors, the patients were wonderful. Anyway, I was diagnosed. Would you like me to go on to that part?
You know what? Well, I knew 2018 was coming. I knew that was the next part of the story. So you carry on.
Yeah. In 2018, I was diagnosed with steatotic liver disease, and used to be called fatty liver disease. And by the time I was diagnosed, I had really very few symptoms. I had the low platelet level and some fatigue that I didn't really know where was coming from. And that's all I had. But by the time I was diagnosed, I had NASH, what was called NASH then. And I needed a transplant to be able to survive. So I was in liver failure for 3 years until my transplant in January of 2021. And I did really well with the transplant. I had had abdominal surgery 3 times before that, so I knew what to expect. And it probably didn't hurt that I had very few nerve endings left in my abdomen by that time, but I did really well. I was up and walking in the halls, and they discharged me early. And then A week later, I collapsed in my room. My daughter was trying to take me out to the car, and I just collapsed. And she ended up having to call an ambulance. And I was taken back to University of Pittsburgh, which is where I had my transplant. And I had COVID. And I was hospitalized for another month. And I had a interesting kind of different COVID. I really didn't have trouble breathing, although I couldn't keep my saturation level up. So they put me on a nasal cannula of
Yeah.
oxygen. Mine was almost all neurological, though. I was hallucinating. I couldn't talk. I couldn't walk. It was very frightening. And I was affected for up until now. I still have problems from long COVID.
Do you remember? Because I use this for a reference for myself because there's. No, I'm going to ask you a question. If you don't remember, it doesn't matter. Do you remember the variant that you got? Because the timing that you're talking about sounds like it's Delta. Is that? Do you know if it was the Delta variant?
Yes, it was early 2021. It was a
Right.
time when we were all still very frightened of COVID
Yeah.
and didn't know much about it. It was right before I was able to get vaccinated. I begged them to vaccinate me, but it was when vaccinations were only going to healthcare workers.
Right.
So I couldn't
Right.
get vaccinated. But I was on massive amounts of immunosuppressants, and wherever I picked it up, I got it, and I was very ill. So it was very scary.
So so you're in the hospital for 30 days. You've got symptoms of COVID. Is there a point in that after the 30 days where you started to recognize that you're getting into a post viral condition like that we would call long hauler or long COVID now, that you actually made a conscious. You went, wow, I'm getting some of these symptoms that they're talking about.
Well, that probably happened later for me. Because I had had the transplant, I kept thinking, well, this is just a lot at one time, and I will recover from this. And so I would guess it was probably a couple months after that I thought, I'm really not going to recover from this.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah.
I need to talk to somebody about this. And I did talk to a COVID team at University of Pittsburgh. And I have since talked to other physicians, but they can't diagnose it, and
No.
there's really no treatment for it.
No.
Uh, I did all the research, went into trying to understand chronic fatigue syndrome and the whole skill of pacing myself. But beyond that, um, I haven't really had any treatment for this.
What self care do you give? What do you do for yourself that you've learned?
Well, I was really struggling with depression. And so I worked really hard on trying to turn that around and to find joy in my life. When I went into this, I didn't expect to be disabled, and I feel somewhat disabled even still, but I really felt it back then. And I couldn't understand what was happening, and my modus operandi is to research everything that happens to me to
Yeah.
death
Yeah.
and make
Me
sure
too.
I become an expert on it.
Yeah.
And that's why I ended up writing the book, because I had done so much research, and as much as possible, I understood what was happening to me. Didn't have any huge big answers, but it helped me cope with what was happening. I had hoped that I would go back to work, and I have not been able to do that.
You can't go back to work right now, or would you prefer to work remotely and at your own pace? Because I mean, you've got
Yeah,
this sharp mind that, I mean, why waste that?
I very much want to work. I feel like I have a lot to contribute,
Right.
but it has to be a situation where I would be able to pace myself and manage my schedule. It's not going to be running hospitals like I used
No,
to
no, no,
do.
no.
So,
So you've written this book.
uh-huh.
How did you sort out the flow of the book? What's your main themes? Like how that you wanted to get out of the book? And is there another book that's going to follow up, because your story isn't over? You're just in the middle of your story.
I hope so. So, my book goes through what liver disease is, and describes a little bit about my background so that people have some understanding of who's writing this book. And then it goes through everything that you would expect if you had liver disease and you needed a transplant and you had one. My goal is to prepare people, hopefully to prevent them from being as ill as I was. You know, the numbers of people with steatotic liver disease have risen even from when I wrote that book. When I wrote that book, it was 25% of our population. Now it's up to a third. And a lot of that is probably better identification, because when I got ill, nobody knew anything about this disease. The doctors hadn't been trained in it for the most part, and certainly GPs or your primary care physician, most of them didn't know much about liver disease. And that's changing rapidly. So that's a really good thing. But my hope is that the book will help people manage their disease and avoid any bad outcomes that they can.
Yeah, well, I've spoken with a number of people now that have serious diseases, many of them. I've got a couple different kinds of arthritis, and how you have to really learn as the patient and the advocate how how does it affect your body? How does COVID affect your body? I'll be honest with you, you're the very first transplant person I've spoken to. So you have a perspective around transplant, which, as you say, you're immunocompromised, which is how I got long COVID, because I got COVID, got very ill, and then that carried me into long COVID, and I have some of it now. I don't. I work a lot more now than I did, say, a year ago. But you're at that position right now where, what were your top symptoms? And then how do you manage those? Because one of the comments you made is, of course, there's no test. And one of them is people don't recognize it. Well, the thing I hear from all physicians is that they don't treat it as much as they manage the individual symptoms, as opposed to thinking of it as long COVID, which is 250 odd symptoms. They think of it as, we have Sue Green, and she has this symptom, and this symptom, and she's a transplant recipient. So how do you manage that? That to me, I'd love to hear about that.
So my symptoms were the extreme fatigue. I literally, the first year after I had
Yeah,
COVID,
yeah,
I couldn't get out of bed. I
yeah,
did get out
yeah,
of bed. I got out of bed to take care of myself, take a shower, make myself food, make myself eat. I
yeah.
had lost 45 pounds when I was in the hospital for COVID.
You don't look like you could lose 45 pounds.
Well, I was 45 pounds heavier then. Um,
Wow.
so I was in bad shape when I went home.
Yeah.
I was losing my hair. I could
Mm,
barely move. I was in bed for a year.
yeah.
Um, I also had tremendous neurological issues. I'm way better now. But back then, like, I didn't drive for a while, but I would be riding down the road with someone driving, and I would see something, and it would bring back a memory in my brain, but it was the wrong memory. And I don't know if that makes any sense,
It
but
does make sense.
I
It
could
does make sense.
feel the lack of connection in my brain. It
Yeah.
was so weird. And it was very upsetting. And I became more and more depressed. And I finally called someone about that. And they put me on a medication called Lamictal, which
Yeah.
is not for depression necessarily, but she said, I need to calm your brain down. And it did help. But neurologically, I was just a mess for a long time. I felt like bugs were crawling all over me all the time.
Yeah.
Really had bad sleep.
Do you remember how you were managing that along the way, or did you just power through it? Because I had to just power through it. I had some help, but on the neurological side, like I had serious brain fog. I'd be in the middle of a conversation with you and forget what I was talking about
Right. Yeah, me too.
completely.
And
Just
that is so different from how I usually am. It
right.
was so upsetting
Yeah.
I'm usually very detail oriented. I think quickly,
Yeah.
and man, that was gone. And that was
Yeah.
very disturbing. So I did ask for help. I got that medication. It helped some. I kept doing my research. I kept finding things I wanted people to do for me. I decided at one point that I had encephalopathy, viral
Okay.
induced, and I went to see a neurologist about that. And she said, well, you aren't presenting as a patient with encephalopathy. And that was true, but there were cases in the literature of people that had the same symptoms as me that benefited from steroids. Anyway, she would not treat me unless I had a spinal tap.
Oh.
And because she wanted to see if it was in my spinal fluid.
Oh,
And
I see. Okay. All
but
right.
by that time I was so traumatized medically, and
Mm-hmm.
there was no way I was going to have another invasive medical procedure at that point. And I guess by that point, I also realized that I was getting better over time.
Yeah.
And so my hope was that that was going to continue. Um, and I have not found anything else to try that I would be willing to try for long COVID.
Well, okay. Now you're talking to a guy that is not a doctor or scientist or a clinician, but I do sure hang around a lot of them. If you Part of my experience is that if you really understand your symptoms, then you can start looking for those outlier clinicians that can match your symptoms to their new protocols. I'm actually interviewing somebody next week who's got a brand new protocol, and I'm really excited about that session. Now, coming back to you for a second, though, that now where where you're at right now, it's eerily similar to my story. Like I feel like I've gotten a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and the brain fog is getting a little bit better. I feel a little bit better. I still sleep a lot, but I've chosen to do this because I can pick and choose my times of doing it. I can pace my day. I can pace the amount of work I do. You don't want to waste your future. You want to use your future, and you want to do some help. So specifically, what do you see that you're going to be doing in the future? Like in very, you can say high level, or even you can drill down. How do you think you can help? Because I mean, clearly, if you can run hospitals, you're a really smart lady. That's tough stuff. So, what do
Well,
you see?
um, Larry, can I shut the curtain
Sure.
again?
Yeah. Yeah. Go
It's
ahead. Yeah.
shining
Absolutely.
on me.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I hope for my future, well, I didn't tell you, somewhere in my background, I also trained after I got my MSW to be a psychotherapist, and I was in private practice
Ah.
for a while. So I have that background with people, and I'm very interested in helping people cope with chronic disease. And I also finished, while I was in liver failure for 3 years, I finished a coaching program. So lately I've been thinking a lot about doing health coaching, helping people manage their disease and reach goals for better health. So something like that. I've been writing is what I've been doing this whole
See,
time.
you can do a lot of that work remotely. What you just described, you can do that work remotely.
Yes.
That's the key. You can do it
Yeah.
just the way you and I are doing it right now.
Yeah. So I do feel hopeful about the future. I do feel like I have something to contribute, and I hope I figure that out. But right
Well,
now, I'm also writing for an online support group, writing articles
right.
and doing moderation when people write in who have liver disease. I haven't gotten involved with the long COVID. I belong to a support group for long COVID, but I haven't gotten involved with that as a
Right.
writer, mostly because I don't feel like I have great answers. I can help people learn how to pace themselves, and I think another big part of this whole thing is accepting that you have limitations now
Yep.
that you didn't have before.
You bet.
And
100%.
that is a task. I did not do that well in the beginning. I
Well,
was I
yeah, I
was not a
understand that.
happy camper,
Yeah.
but I've accepted it. I think now, not in terms of this is how I'm going to be the rest of my life. I don't think in those terms, but I am what I am right now, and there are things I can do. There are many things that I enjoy doing, and so I live my life from that standpoint, and I do hope that I can contribute somehow in the future.
Well, from our first conversation, I didn't realize that you had the therapy background. Now, I'm bringing that up because I post several hundred articles a week, and
Yeah,
I would say a good 20% of them are dealing with the psychological effects of the pandemic, being sick, just the whole gamut. And it's every age group, starting
right.
right from toddlers right to the elderly. And if I, if I think about it right now, there's a half a billion plus minus people that have some type of a post-viral condition from this pandemic. That leaves a lot of room for people like yourself that have some of that training and then also have the personal experience. Some of the best clinicians in the world right now are clinicians that have long COVID, believe it or not. And and those are the ones that I'm supporting deeply. Like I'm pushing their agendas because they know what this is. The problem is I wouldn't be able to find two Sue Greens. And that's a bit of a, so I wouldn't be able to find your symptoms with a transplant person that's a female, like this is what makes this a complicated affair. So you staying in the game and wanting to help people, I think that one of the greatest gifts we give is the gift that you're not alone. Like, yeah, I hear, I understand what you're saying, and then being able to take them forward that way. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of groups I can't belong to because there's just a lot of people that have given up mentally. It is a hard challenge. I
It
appreciate
is.
that. Yeah. So I'd like to see you stay in on that side as well, on the mental side, because we don't have enough people that have had the disease that sit in a certain cohort that can express how they're managing their lives. Because I believe you will get better. I'm better, but I think for some people it's 3 years, some it's going to be 5, some it's never. They're going to be disabled. They still need the
Well,
help. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, it's my third year, and
Yeah,
I am so much better than I was that first year.
yeah.
Oh, I do get better over time, and I can see that. I don't know why. I wish I knew why. I mean, maybe it's just time, but I pay a lot of attention to what I eat, the
Yeah,
supplements I take,
yeah,
the
yeah,
exercise I get. I'm
yeah.
I'm very careful about all that, and I prefer to think that that has something to do with getting better.
I went on that vitamin D thing that a lot of people that I really respect that are scientists, they kind of kicked me into that, give it a go. It's not going to hurt you. Try the
Right.
vitamin D. I think self-care becomes, and this is tricky. You do need exercise, but how much is enough and how much is too much when you have what we have? When are you going backwards? So
Well,
that's tricky.
yeah. I didn't do much exercise the first year
No,
after.
no, no. You
But then
couldn't.
when I went back to doing it, oh my God, it was, if I would exercise one day, I'd be bedridden the next day. I
Yeah,
mean, that was,
yeah.
the extent of my exhaustion. But now I can tell I'm getting more fit all the time.
Yeah.
And I work really hard at that. It's important because I feel
What mental exercises do you put yourself through? I put myself through some stuff on purpose.
about the exercise.
Yeah, in my like exercising my mind. I've been doing that a lot. I want to reconnect, and so I do a lot of mental exercises. What do you do?
Well, I live in an adult senior community.
Right.
I moved here about a year and a half or almost 2 years now ago. And it's perfect for me. I was really upset about it when I moved here because I thought, I never saw myself at my age being in this kind of
Yeah.
community. It's independent living. It's not anything else. But the nice part about living here is I have a social community just ready made here. And I make sure that I do activities with them. Some of them are exercise, but some of them are playing games that
Yeah.
keep my mind going. There's a whole bunch of governmental kinds of things that we take care of here. So there's ways for me to interact with people, which is really important here. And right outside my front door, right up the hill, is a gym and a pool,
Right.
Olympic-sized pool indoors.
Yeah.
And to the right is a restaurant. When I first moved here, one of the things I was really worried about is I could not feed myself.
Right.
I was too exhausted to go through that kind of planning, and I would just forget to eat, and which was unusual for me. But I feel like I'm in the right place now, and I make sure that I interact with people and do things that keep my mind. I'm on my phone all the time, as I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
Scrolling through, learning new things.
Well, I think that there's value in the fact that you want to stay in this and you want to start helping people and advocating and joining consultancies and doing some Zoom and I think that's playing a part in my recovery for me is that I dug in and I wanted to do some of this stuff and it's kind of kept me challenged, really challenged actually.
Yes, I
And
agree
then
with that completely. And if I want to help people with these diseases, I need to stay up to date.
you need to stay up to date and I think at least this is my view of advocacy is I think you need to find your lane. Where are you comfortable in adding value in people's lives? And I found my lane and I'm very comfortable in it. And yes, I can go outside of it. But when I look at Sue Green, I see somebody that can come at this from a chronic disease transplant all on its own. And then what it's like to try to recover with COVID. And let's face it, we're all going to get infected more often in the future. So this is why I don't see this going away, because COVID is not going away, which means you're going to have to deal with more infections. I'm going to have to deal with more infections. What does that look like? How can I help?
Yeah, COVID is not going away. I mean, you just keep reading about all the new things they're
Yeah,
figuring out about it.
yeah.
And the more often that you get it, the more likely you are to get long COVID. I read yesterday, for instance.
That's the
And
number one cause right now, is multiple infections.
yeah, and I try to talk to my friends, um, particularly outside of here, friends that I've had for a long, long time, because they don't seem to think twice about getting COVID. Oh,
Well,
it's
they
just
don't.
like
Yeah.
cold. And I keep trying to tell them that, we still don't know what it does to you.
That's
And the
right.
more you get it, the more apt you are to get some of the really bad side effects.
Well, we what we don't know more than anything is you could be infected once, twice, three times, four times, and for some reason that fifth one triggers something, and you go from 100 miles an hour to 1 mile an hour in a day.
Yeah,
So,
that's a
you
really
know,
good description. Going from
yeah,
100 miles an hour, which I
yeah,
feel like I used to do,
right,
to 1 mile an hour.
right,
That is a very hard adjustment.
yeah. Well, and
That's
what
all you can
happens?
do.
Well, this is a touchy subject for some people, but I have this firm belief that, and somebody wrote on one of my social media pages today, they were asking about COVID fatigue. And I'm a big believer that there's COVID fatigue in society. And therefore, when somebody says, well, I got the mild version, well, they don't understand that there's no such thing as mild. There's just,
Right,
like you'll get asymptomatic or some symptoms, or they'll be severe, or they'll be very severe, or you're dead. Those are your options. And you can't pick which one you're going
right.
to get on the
You don't have
next
any
infection.
control over that.
No control over it, and they don't care if you're 1 year old or if you're 100 years old. Like that's the difficulty. But my theory around COVID fatigue is, until the bodies are stacking up again like they were in 2021, there's a sense of, I'm tired of that. I don't want to talk about that. And I think it's a very human thing. I don't. That's not a
No, and
blame
I
game.
understand it completely.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. I don't have a problem with it. I can understand society being like that.
Yeah,
Problem is that we stop being smart about it.
right.
And that's where we need the people like yourself with the megaphones writing books. And speaking of the devil, are you on Amazon with that book?
Yes.
Yeah, see that. So I'm going to put that Amazon link at the bottom after we're done today, because there's that.
Okay.
And do you mind? Do you mind if people get in touch with you? Like I don't know where the fine line is with you. Everybody gets in touch with me, and I just pick and choose who I'm going to talk to. But do you? Is there a privacy issue with you? Do you want them to come through groups, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm really new at this, so I have been trying to figure that out. I
Yeah,
am on LinkedIn and I post on LinkedIn,
yeah.
and I'm happy to have people contact me through that. I don't want to, I'm on Instagram too, but I keep that private. I don't mind people contacting me, and I probably need to figure out how that's going to
Well,
happen.
I have an idea for you, and I'll put it on the public because it's not something you have to do.
Okay.
I can be pretty close in saying to you that there's room in the world for somebody to pick up the ball of liver disease, transplant, COVID, and long COVID. And you'll be surprised at the people that will find that niche if you go back into that world and say, I think we can do something about this. And you can make that private. But
That's a good
they first of all have to know that that exists. So you've got a book. You've got all these ways of doing this, and then you can filter out the what I call the trolls, or the ones the people that are just negative. But there is room in the world, and this is actually one of the reasons why I had you on today, is that there's more and more people that are defining themselves in their niche, because that's how they're finding that they're being helpful, is that they're not trying to take the broad view. They're taking that very narrow view of what happened with them. And then they're finding out there's thousands of people like me. And they didn't know that. They thought they were it.
Well, I feel sort of that way. Like I'm the
Yeah.
only one that had both. But I'm sure that anybody that had a liver transplant around the time that I did, I'm sure they got COVID
Oh,
be-
no
because they
question.
were on massive doses of immunosuppressants and they were going into the hospital and COVID was there. I mean, it just was.
Yeah. And there's no way to get around it. It still is. I mean,
Yeah.
we just went through the highest infection rate this past summer for 3 years. And people go, well, no, COVID's gone.
No.
It infected more people this past summer than it did in the last 3 years.
And
Crazy.
those are only the ones that reported it.
Well, because of the asymptomatic issues.
Right.
Yeah, right. I get it.
And people don't
So
test themselves like they
no,
used to.
no.
So they
Well,
don't
and
know what's wrong with them.
yeah, out of sight, out of mind is kind of the way I look at that. Is that, and I just did a podcast with I call him Doc Roy, and he explains what COVID is. And when you put that together, what you're talking about, and you put it together with some of the other pieces I have, you really find how complex this is. So before we get to final comments, I just want to say I think one of the ways I want to work with you is I think that there's other types of clinics, other types of experts that could help, that you can help because of your experience and also your healthcare background. So you look at the other side of your brain. So I'd like to be a part of helping you create a new space in this long
That'd be
COVID.
great.
I would like to help you with that because
I would
it's
appreciate
needed
that.
and it's not hard. Like it won't be magic. It won't be Larry inventing something. It's very simple stuff, but it can be powerful stuff. And then you can run. And then you can run with that.
That's
Because
a great.
I know you want to help. I know you do.
I do. I mean, it gives meaning to what I've gone through
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
help other people.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's really hard to find meaning in this.
I have to have meaning. I can't exist around. I call it. I drive people crazy, Sue. I call it playing out the clock. I don't want to play out the clock. I want to do something, and this
Yeah.
is what I fell
Yeah.
into. But I think that you somebody like yourself with such an exhaustive background in healthcare, there's no way you can shut that brain off. I mean you just can't. You want to use that capability. So we'll go there. Have you any final thoughts? Anything?
About COVID?
Anything.
About anything.
Yeah.
I really would like to pursue what you're talking about. I think that I think there has to be a big population out there that have both.
Sure there is.
And I could be
But they got to find you. There's the key.
right.
They have to find you, and it doesn't mean I don't mean they find you like they're calling up on your phone, but they have to be able to find you, and then they have to recognize the value. And you're starting way ahead of me because you got a book, and you have this past in healthcare, so that they will feel comfort from that.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think the book helps sort of paint me as a legitimate person
Yeah. Oh,
that
you
at
are.
least did a lot of research and cares
Yeah.
about it.
Right. Well, thank you, Sue. Thanks for just talking to me and just
Sure. Thank
because
you.
we're going to do this again, but I think the next time we're going to do it is I think we're going to put some time in between, and we're going to get you up and running with your own very sophisticated advocacy kind of work and see what comes of that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not nearly as hard as I'm making it sound. It's just being organized, being out there, having your face out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed
I
this
appreciate
very
it.
much.
I did
And,
too.
I will catch up to you later.
Okay.